What I'm going to do today is a little bit different. Um, I've said this for a long time. I feel like through the Christian life, there's so many wonderful things that God does. There's so many wonderful things to praise God for, and these stories I think get told and then they get forgotten. And even Jamie, my daughter, is 5 years old. I tell her stories all the time, and she knows them. Sometimes she can finish them, but is she going to remember them when she's 30? Well, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, it's possible, but there's going to come a point in time when she's not going to want me to tell her stories all the time, and she's apt to forget some of this stuff. So, what I thought would be a good thing to do is to preserve some of this in the form of a podcast or a YouTube channel or whatever. Now, obviously, my YouTube channel is for different things, but this is one of the things I want to use it for. I want to preserve some of these memories for people, not just my daughter, but others to hear about the faithfulness of God. Now, the one I want to talk about today happened pretty early on in my Christian life. I don't exactly remember what year it was, but I got saved in 2003, and I began to attend a church where I knew some people. And I would say, in general, these people were all very, very kind to me. Uh, I was a mess. I just got saved out of a very destructive life of alcoholism and drug addiction and just a whole lot of stuff, a whole lot of sin. And with the exception of one woman, I remember when I first came to the church, I was pretty well known through the county as just, if you heard my name, there probably wasn't anything good associated with it. And that started pretty early on. But I remember when I went to church, one of the first times I went to church, this woman I saw who knew me, her son and I went to school together, said, "Rusty Beals, I never thought I would see you here." Now, with the exception of that woman, and just, I'm not mad at her. I actually ended up becoming very good friends with her husband. And he was a dear friend of mine, and he's gone now, and I miss him very much. With the exception of that woman, the people at this church loved me and helped me and were kind to me and were patient with me. And I can't say enough about how loved I felt. Like, they really did love me, which makes what happened after that even all the more difficult. There came a point in time, and the irony of this, if I want to use that term, while I was attending church there, somebody who went to church there gave me a tape. And there was some controversy with the new pastor that came in. And this guy was kind of one of the people who took some issue with him. And I didn't really know a whole lot. I was barely there for 4 years. And I was already teaching a Sunday school class and a member of the board. I was voted a member of the board, which, that should kind of, as a younger Christian, I thought, wow, this is awesome. And as an older Christian, I'm like, there's no way I would put someone who's been a Christian for 4 years on the board, and I wouldn't be allowing him to teach anything. Like, he should be learning and being instructed. But anyway, here I am. There I was on the board, and this guy gave me this tape and said, "Hey, listen to this and tell me what you think." And he handed me a cassette tape, and it was titled uh, "Bible Driven Church." And it was kind of a takeoff of Rick Warren, Purpose Driven Life, and that was going on. That was like the big, you know, thing that was coming through this church at the time, was Purpose Driven Life and all that stuff. But anyway, I listened to this tape. And now remember, like, I was just floating along, like everything was fine. And this tape wrecked me. When I finished listening to it, I thought to myself, I'm in a bad church. Like, the guy used the Bible to show what a biblical church is, and my church doesn't look like this. This isn't a good church. And so I started to ask questions. And if the Bible is your guide as a church, when people start to ask questions, you can point them to the scriptures and say, this is why we do this, or this is why we don't do this. But when you don't have that as your guide, questions are not really appreciated. And, the Bible clearly says that the servant of God ought to be able to teach and be patient. That's not what I experienced. There was no patience at all. I was actually kind of blown off. Like, don't ask, why are you asking these questions? Don't stir the water, don't rock the boat, whatever you want to call it. Nobody said that, but that's the impression I got, because they just didn't want to deal with me. And I thought, well, if what I learned from this tape is true, I'm in a bad church, and now I'm trying to ask questions to make certain I'm in a bad church, and I'm being treated like this, which kind of further just proves I'm in a bad church. And so I resigned from the board, from the Sunday school class, and I left. I went and spoke with one of the other board members and told them I was resigning, and wrote the pastor a letter explaining why I resigned. He flat out told me he didn't read it. He threw it out. He deleted it. It was an email. He deleted it, never read it. And I thought, wow, thank you for confirming even further what I had started to suspect. As much as I believe these people truly did love me, and I'm not speaking about everyone, because I'm sure there's people there. There's people I'm still friends with. One guy to this day that went to that church. And I know there's others that, never said anything about me, but there was a group of people that were saying things about me after I left that were just, some of it was absolutely just made up. And I'm not going to share what was said because it was just so foolish. I don't think it's worth even bringing up anymore. But that was very shocking to me when it happened. I thought, wow, I thought I left in an amicable way. Like, I gave reasons why I was leaving, and I didn't say anything, particularly about any one person. I felt like I wasn't in a good church, and I wanted to be somewhere where I would feel that way. These people turned on me like ravenous wolves. Some of them, not all of them, some of them. And I had a friend who was still going to church there who would come and, hey, this is what's going around about you. Well, you know what? I am going to tell you what was said about me. At least one thing. It was said of me that I would go over across the street from my house and try to call up dead spirits out of the cemetery. That that was making its way around to people. Now, as I'm sure you can assume, that you can surmise from this, there's a lot of problems with that. But I can tell you for a fact, I was not over in the cemetery trying to call up dead spirits, and I'm concerned for the theology of someone who thinks that you can actually do that. But I digress. That was very hurtful to me because I'm like, man, that's just a lie. It's just a straight up, flat out lie that someone made up. And I was really just shocked that Christian people who called themselves Christians would do something like that. But I didn't dwell on it. My whole life I didn't care what people thought of me, and now it was just different. Like, now the stuff they thought of me before was actually true. Now they think stuff about me, but it's actually not true. So what do I care? But the chain of events that happened after that, a few years after that, still I look back in shock at how God redeemed me in that scenario, in that situation. So the very friend who was telling me some of the stuff that was being said about me after I left um, ended up being killed in a car accident, and he died. It was very sad, and obviously I was heartbroken. He was a young guy; he was only like 26 years old, and he was a good friend. He also, like me, came from a life of addiction, struggled, you know, with some stuff, and I get contacted by a family member of his, and they asked me, as his friend, if I would speak at his funeral, and I said, "Sure. Can I say whatever I want to say?" And they said, "Yes, you can, say whatever you want to say." And so I went to this funeral. Now, this is an important point. The funeral was being held at this church I left. So all these people who were saying these terrible things about me, I don't know if they were all there, but some of them were. And then I get my opportunity. I go up, and I remember saying, "This is what I know my friend would want me to say if he could choose what I said today." And I launched into the gospel, the law and the gospel. And I let it rip. I mean, I preached my little old heart out. I came down. They finished the funeral service. I was one of the pallbearers. We carried the casket out, went to the cemetery, buried my friend, and it was all over. And it wasn't until sometime later, I don't recall how long afterwards, like, I don't know if it's just because I'm dumb sometimes, but I didn't even realize what had happened. God took this horrible, terrible tragedy of my friend dying, and he used it for his glory and for my good. He redeemed me that day. He put me in the pulpit of the very church who was maligning my name when I left. And they were all there. Think to yourself for a moment, in what world, in what scenario can you imagine that you could end up in the very pulpit of the church who's slandering your name and saying horrible things about you and making things up about you? I can't think of another scenario where that would even happen. But God did it. See, God not only cares about us to the point where, he gives us everything that we that we absolutely need. But then he goes above and beyond that. And in this situation, the people who thought that I was off the rails heard me preach the gospel that day. And at the very least, walked away from there thinking, I'm not so sure what was said about this guy was absolutely true, because I didn't hear anything wrong with what he had to say. Like, that was actually, some good preaching. But God was glorified in that. He was also glorified in that, because his servant who was preaching his gospel was redeemed. Not just salvifically, but redeemed in the eyes of some of these people. Now, I didn't need that. I didn't. It wouldn't have changed a thing. But that was a gift from a loving Father. And I take that back. I did need that. And I still to this day will be forever amazed at the mercy of God in that situation. And praise be to his name. I hope you were encouraged by this, and I've got some more. I'm gonna share them here and there, and I hope that they're a blessing to you to hear, as much as they were a blessing to me to experience.